Michelle was an apology as well. I got a text on the way in.
Hello, we're going to start in 1 minute. If I can ask you to take a seat, thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock and I declare the annual meeting of electors for 2022 open. I'd like to start by saying Kaya Wanju Mali Budja. Hello, welcome to Swan Country. The City of Swan acknowledges the traditional custodians of this area, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and we pay respects to their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. Pay our respects to their elders past, present and their descendants. Just a bit of housekeeping, the procedures for tonight's meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to present the 2021 annual report to the community and allow you, the electors, to have a say, ask questions on local matters. The annual report provides key insight into the City of Swan's major project, economic position and trends to watch for the future, as well as demonstrating how the city's funds are raised and spent. Under the Local Government Act 1995, procedures for this meeting are to be determined by myself as the presiding member. In an endeavour to provide fair and equal opportunity for all electors in attendance to address the meeting, procedures adopted are as follows. To participate in the meeting, you must have registered at the entrance. If you have registered, you would have received a red and a green card for voting purposes. Electors may ask questions, make a statement, move, second and vote on motions. Firstly, electors will be offered the opportunity to ask questions and will be permitted up to 5 questions at one time. We will endeavour to respond to any questions of a general nature tonight. However, any question requiring detailed information that we're not able to provide tonight and needs a written, more detailed response will be taken on notice, and those responses to all questions will be provided in the minutes of this meeting. If electors have not submitted their questions in writing prior to this meeting, these questions should be provided in a written format and provided to City officers, so we make sure we have your question recorded correctly. Members of the public who have submitted a request to ask questions at the meeting will be invited to speak in the order they have registered. Any person who is not registered may give an opportunity at the end of the meeting. Following question time, electors will have the opportunity to make a statement or move any motions. Motions need to be moved and seconded before any discussion is to occur, and electors will be offered the opportunity to make a statement and they'll be permitted 3 minutes. A mover will be able to have 3 minutes to speak to their motion. The seconder of the motion will have 3 minutes and any other elector will have 3 minutes to speak on the motion. The mover of the motion will then have a right of reply for 3 minutes. Each elector present is entitled to 1 vote but does not have to vote. Each motion will be determined by a simple majority vote. Voting is conducted so that no voting is secret. When I ask you to support the motion, please raise your hand showing your green card, or if you're against the motion, please raise your hand showing the red card. Reminds me of a cooking show I watched. Please keep your comments respectful to the council, staff and other members of the community here tonight. And if I consider any speaker not being respectful, I'll rule that question, statement or motion out of order and ask that person to return to their seat. I don't think it will happen, but in case this meeting becomes very unruly, I'll call an end to the meeting. So if you can't behave in a civil manner, you may lose the opportunity to speak, and everyone else will lose that opportunity as well. When you come forward, please state, there's a microphone in the middle aisle, please state your name and suburb of residence, and then proceed to ask your question or to move a motion. Item 2 is attendance and apologies. Mr CEO, do we have any?
Just from Councillor Podovnik, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Podovnik's an apology tonight. Item 3, receiving the annual report 2020-21. Consistent with the Section 5.27 of the Local Government Act and Regulation 15 of the Local Government Administration Regulations, the matters to be discussed at the General Electors meeting are firstly the contents of the annual report for the previous financial year. At the ordinary meeting held on the 15th of December 2021, Council adopted the 2020-21 annual report, including the financial statements. Is there anyone in the hall tonight who wishes to raise a question or raise any concern relating to the content of the annual report? Being no questions on the annual report, we'll move to item 4, which is general business, and item 4.1, questions from electors. Questions and answers recorded in the minutes of the meeting may be summarised in accordance with the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996. 5 questions permitted per person in the first instance, and this will allow the opportunity to ask additional questions that may be available towards the end of the meeting, time permitting. Any questions taken on notice at the meeting will be responded to in writing in the minutes. The following questions have been received in writing prior to the meeting, and Leah Bowden of Woodbridge asked, at the last ordinary council meeting, Mayor Lucas spoke against Councillor Johnson's motion seeking council support of his motion to allow public to be present at an upcoming briefing/workshop meeting concerning the Midland Oval. The motion was defeated. Given the importance of the issue to the public, the long history of public dissatisfaction with the city's handling of the Midland Oval issue and perceived lack of transparency, why did I as Mayor and councillors vote against the motion? She found it unacceptable, and the public should have the right to decide to be excluded from the workshop of the meeting. Well, I've had the opportunity of reviewing the live stream. In fact, I did not speak against Councillor Johnson's motion. In fact, it was Councillor Kiley's motion. Councillor Johnson tried to make an amendment, and that was defeated 10-5, and subsequently Councillor Kiley's motion was passed unanimously. Lewis Crawley, is she here? Sorry, Lois, if you could come forward and ask your question. Or have you seen them in the report and are you happy with the answers? Or does anything arise from them? Please come forward and ask your questions. Thank you. Can we just make sure that microphone
is it on? Oh, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
So thank you, Mayor and councillors, for addressing the question around part of the question being the Plymouth Street site, and it's promising that alternatives are being investigated, and the response is in relation to that site. But our questions also refer to the Devon Street site, which our group has made deputations to council in recent times, and that would be that lot 178 that was mentioned in the question 1. So it's our understanding that the WA Planning Commission is seeking an end manager for this site, and in addition, Minister Michelle Roberts, who visited the site in November with Minister Amber Jade Sanderson, has also been in conversations with the City of Swan regarding this matter. That's our understanding. So our questions also relate to lot 178, 0 to 4 on the Devon Street site, which Friends of Woodbridge Bushlands are involved in re-establishing the vegetation at the moment. So we're really looking to have that part of the question addressed too.
Mr van der Linde, can you provide an update on any new information? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. with regards to Devon Road, those properties are already, that's a reserve under the MRS, and it's in ownership of the WIPC. I'm not aware of any discussions by the WIPC with the city in terms of the city taking over any management of that area. So we'll take that part of the question on notice and follow up and get back to you on it.
Thank you, Lois.
Thank you.
They were the only questions received in advance. I'll now call for any statements, public statements, and anyone has the opportunity of making a public statement. You'll have 3 minutes. Mr. Considine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors. The Helena River has a vision of together caring for country, of a healthy, vibrant Helena River Regional Park. Our opposition to the present concept design for the Lloyd Street Bridge stems from this vision. The concept design threatens the continuity of the river system, its heritage and its ecology. It debases all that might be forever. This vision predates our awareness of the threat posed by the concept designs for the Lloyd Street Bridge. You can be forgiven for thinking that we are only on about the bridge. We are not. We're about a vision for the Helena River. The Helena River is the only intact freshwater river system feeding the Swan River. Most of the rivers of the southwest province, once fresh and vibrant, are now salinised as a consequence of excessive clearing for agriculture and forestry. It is the only river able to sustain the health of flooded gums in the long term. The Swan River is dangerously salinised and the floodplain of the Canning upstream of the Roe Highway filled and reduced to a drain. Councillors, the Lower Helena River is a rare and exceedingly valuable billion-dollar asset, held largely in trust for the people of Western Australia by the WAPC. It was identified in the early 1980s as such and proposed for the System 6 network of public parks and reserves. It was in the late 1990s and the early 2000s again proposed as a regional park. The Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions and EMRIC, now Perth NRM, maintain a management policy that documents its heritage, history and plans for care. This year, that plan will be reviewed. The weakness of that plan is its advisory status.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to cut this short. We imagine a plan that will have the gestation as long as that, perhaps, of the nascent Lloyd Street Bridge. Not a plan lying in a dusty drawer. It will be a continuum of a vibrant activity of volunteer groups working to rehabilitate the river, document its heritage and biodiversity, of school student groups learning about the natural environment, of working with and training young Aboriginal people in how to care for country, how to protect it, value it, gain from it, and educate the rest of us about it. Planning, documenting, holding picnics and walks, perhaps using traditional dinner sites to pass on traditional knowledge to the whole community. We can achieve that. We have the contacts, we have the experience. Councillors, no one needs to lose. We can have a bridge and our vision, but only if the concept design is changed. Donate your soil stockpiles to MRWA, you don't need them. Negotiate with your Aboriginal community. We have. We invite the City of Swan to join the Helena River Alliance in developing this vision of together, caring for country, together, healing people, healing communities. Mayor Lucas, this could be part of your reconciliation action plan. It could be your mark.
Thank you, Mr. Considine. That's your time. That was the only person who had registered to make a public statement. I'm now inviting people from the floor to come forward and make a public statement if you indicate. Yes, if you could please go to the microphone, state your name and the suburb you come from. And you also have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. My name is Deirdre Foster. I'm the chair of the Bennett Springs Residents Association, and this has come from the Bennett Springs Residents Association where I live. We've got 3 questions that we wanted to submit. The first is, what is happening with the development of the land on
You make asking questions or making a public statement?
questions?
Okay, questions is next. We're doing public statements. Sorry.
No worries.
I'll just ask while Deirdre's up there, is there anyone else on the floor who wishes to make a public statement? No further public statements, then we're now going into the question time. Please
Thank you.
remain there and
Thank
ask
you.
your questions.
All right. I won't rewind. I'll continue if that's okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
keep going.
Great. The first is that we've had some residents and obviously members of our Residents Association asking about what's happening with the development of the land, Lot 400 Marshall Road. It's one encompassing block, Lot 630 Beachborough Road North, Lot 402 Bennett Springs Drive and Lot 106 Bennett Springs Drive. There's been a lot of capital works going on there. A lot of residents are unsure. We had seen some initial submissions for a garden centre, a petrol station and a fast food outlet, but we've not actually seen anything come to the public so that we know exactly what's going on in that area, and we would love to be updated. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take those questions on notice. I've got the first 3 lot numbers, but if you can either hand that in so we can get the exact addresses, that'll be much appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've got 2 others.
Yes, please continue.
Thank you. The Orchid Park, Oriole Park bushfire plans, the corner of Beachborough Road and the entrance into Orchid Park has a large area of bush that has been alight a number of times, and we would be very grateful of knowing what the bushfire plans are to maintain that area, because it's very close to residences and it has been quite frightening for those residents when that's gone up at least 3 times in the last 5 years that I am aware of.
Thank you.
And then the third is something we learned about when we were meeting on another matter which I'll speak about later. The closure of Tatler Way, I think it is, yes, in East Bennett Springs. It enters onto Altone Road, and we were told that it was actually going to be closed. A number of residents were quite concerned that that would bottleneck that east end of Bennett Springs and their entrance.
Thank you. Yes, we received the same information that Tatler Way is proposed to be closed as part of the East Link roadworks, and I forget the road one to the north, but that would be the main entrance out.
That's Bennett Springs Drive.
No, there's one in between. There's a short.
Oh, is there? Okay.
Yeah. So,
Sorry.
but I'll take those questions on
Thank you.
notice and get back to you with all those answers. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. I now call for any other person who'd like to ask questions. Yes, sir, if you can go to the microphone, state your name, your suburb, and you can ask up to 5 questions at this stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, councillors. My question's regarding an employee that passed away from the City of Swan a number of years ago.
Sorry, can we get your name and suburb?
Sorry. My name's Bill, or Spud Carroll, and I live in Gidgee. Sorry. My question's regarding an employee of the City of Swan who passed away a number of years ago, Mr Grant McKinnon. Grant was a long-term employee of the City of Swan. He started out as the Natural Areas Manager. He then moved on to the Natural Areas Asset Coordinator, and then he was the Senior Natural Areas Assets Officer. With the current situation that we have up at the Lloyd Street Bridge area, all the natural areas that I think there was a situation at the men's shed and a eucalyptus rudis. So these were all the things that Grant used to be able to comment on. He was a great help with people up in, I'm involved with Friends of Gidgee Reserve and all the natural areas along 2J Road, etc. And I'm just wondering why Grant's position has never been replaced.
I'm not sure, Mr Mayor, I can take it on notice.
We'll have to take that question on notice. The CEO has arrived some years after Mr McKinnon's passing away. But I'd just like to let you know, if you weren't already, that the city honoured Grant McKinnon with a bench up at Wandoo Heights and a memorial there because, according to his long-time partner, who's also a City of Swan employee, that was one of his most favourite spots in the city, so we've recognised him with a park bench and a memorial at Wandoo Heights.
And can I just further to that, we actually did a walk up there to honour Grant's efforts that he put in at Wandoo Heights, and we went up there and did a bit of a chat for him, etc.
Remembrance.
Some of the other employees from the City of Swan Bush crew came along, but I just find it very difficult to believe that someone like Grant has not been replaced.
Thank you. We'll take
Thank
that
you.
question on notice and get back to you. Any other questions from the floor? Yes, if you can come to the microphone, state your name, your suburb and ask your questions. Thank you.
I'll take my mask off. Lynn Deering from 51 Homesdale Road in Woodbridge. If I said we have a city between two rivers surrounded by native flora and fauna, located alongside a food bowl with an enormous cultural heritage, would you think, oh yes, you're talking about Midland? Last year, Paul Murray wrote an article in the West Australian in which he describes the bungling mess of planning in Midland. Well, not a fan of Mr Murray, his article does draw attention to the fact that there has been much interference by many WA state authorities, a continual of what is to be done to Midland as though it is a blank canvas. Murray lists poor levels of cooperation and fragmentation of the government authorities' responsibilities, while highlighting the impact this has had upon planning decisions.
Sorry.
Matters relating to...
Sorry, Mrs Deering.
Yep, I'm getting to a question.
Well, if we can get to the question.
Okay.
Otherwise, I thought you should have come up at public statement time.
Oh,
You
sorry.
can ask your questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So, even our new proposed station is being located in the wrong place, and it's destined to have consequences. It would seem to me, over many years, that there's been too much focus on a deficit model for Midland. There is little shaping of a vision for Midland based upon its potential. Is this because we as a community or council don't have a real vision for Midland?
I'll try and partly answer that question and we'll add to it later on. As you're aware, a lot of the area of the Midland area is not under the city's control. It's under state control, such as the location of the train station. And I can only speak for myself, but it was not my preferred option. The development of the old railway workshops, the proposed closure of Robertson Road, and many other asset shifting and funding and construction that's going on is out of the control of the City of Swan. And I can only speak for myself. I'm opposed to a lot of it, but we have to step in line with the state government because they overrule us, unfortunately. But I'm happy to meet with you and talk about any other issues that you can bring that we do control to try and get cooperation. I can't hear you if you...
Can I respond?
You can come back to the microphone so everyone can hear you.
Sorry. I'm wondering if we, as the City of Swan, had a much stronger vision around what we're trying to achieve as a community and you as councillors, that if that was really clearly articulated, would that, do you think, might actually drive some of the conversation? It's particularly if it was shared.
Well, as I said, I've just welcomed you to come and meet with me so I can get your views and we can go from there. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to ask questions? Yes, if you could please come to the microphone, state your name, your suburb and ask your questions. Thank you.
Quick one, Smadar Turner from Swanview. I just learned that Scheme 17 was to be changed, which the WAPC has ordered the city to write a new one in October 20. And I was wondering what is the time frame to create new Scheme 18?
Mr Vanderlyn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The review of the town planning scheme has already commenced. It will be done in stages. In total, we expect that the project will be done over about 3 years. What we're busy with at the moment is looking at bringing the scheme text in line with the current town planning regulations as a first stage, and looking at normalization of those development areas that have developed to an extent that the structure plans can be normalized. So it's in process, and it will take about 3 years in total.
Thank you for your question. Are there any other questions from members in the hall? Being no further public questions, we'll move to item 4.2, motions from electors, and is Kerry Rowe from the Upper Swan District Ratepayers resident. Thank you, Kerry. If you can go to the microphone, and you've provided it in writing in advance, if you can read it out. Thank you, with your rationale.
So, Mr. Mayor, I read the entire piece.
Well,
Yes?
it's your motion, and you
Okay.
have 3 minutes to
Thank
speak
you.
to it.
Kerry Rowe, Upper Swan. And my motion is that the City of Swan review and amend, 1, the bylaws relating to extractive industries, which do not appear to have been amended since 19th of October 1982, and number 2, local planning policy, POLE 11.2 clay extraction. The reason being, our request for a review and amendment of the above 2 documents is in order to have a more coordinated approach to drive outcomes which can be enforced, separate applications encompassing more than one lot at a time, both new and renewals, to discourage multiple lots being on one approved licence, which then allows operators to delay any rehabilitation on the multiple sites listed under the one approval, as technically the licence has not expired. Therefore, rehabilitation does not need to occur, and in fact has not occurred on any sites in Upper Swan, although many lots are no longer being excavated. Have watertight and clear conditions. Maintain a current clay pit register available for the general public. Ensure screening vegetation is established prior to the commencement of excavation and fully maintained. Have operators report days, periods of excavation to the city. Have better physical dust monitoring systems in place. Have excavation sites monitored by council staff on a regular basis during excavation times to ensure conditions placed on the approvals are being met, rather than waiting for complaints to be submitted. For example, excavation must occur only during days periods stated, must occur during the hours as stated, must only occur when sufficient watering is carried out, must not occur when easterly winds are blowing. Have excavation sites monitored by council staff on a monthly basis during inactive periods to ensure conditions placed on the licences are being met. For example, to ensure vegetation continues to survive. Dust is not an issue, fencing remains in good condition, area between the earth bunds and the fencings are kept clear of fire hazards. Ensure rehabilitation occurs with a stage approach to allow the land to be returned to its former condition or better, as per the dictionary definition for rehabilitation, with purposeful revegetation being carried out. A safer environment, aesthetically pleasing rather than just ugly piles, heaps of dirt and muddy craters, which have conveniently been called lakes, as is currently visible at all clay pit sites in Upper Swan. Something the community can enjoy, a better natural ecosystem for the local wildlife, and to have a greater respect for the residents and ratepayers within close proximity to the extractive sites.
Thank you. I'll call for a seconder. If you could please state your name. Mariana Stimful. I'm now going to put that motion to the vote. Does there anyone else wish to speak to it? Okay, those in favour, if you'd raise your green cards.
Can I vote?
Is there anyone against? I declare that motion carried. Thank you. If you can go on to your second motion, Kerry.
that the City of Swan review all policies, bylaws relating to any new major residential, commercial, industrial developments within the city with a view to having a more coordinated approach. For example, requiring all companies involved in such developments to formally engage with existing local communities, ratepayers, residents, business owners, etc., and with the city on a regular basis to ensure there is no disadvantage nor adverse effects experienced by the local communities, providing a more stable communication system between developers and the local communities for the provision of facts and updates, rather than allowing confusion and rumour to reign, showing more respect for any existing communities which will be affected by the development, ensuring there is a proper and acceptable interface between the existing community and the new community, keeping tree removal at an absolute minimum, planting revegetation to occur at the earliest possible time within the stages of the development, and providing a finished appearance in improved condition of road verges. 2, having a more formal approach to regular and thorough monitoring of conditions placed on the approvals, rather than waiting for complaints to be submitted. For example, excessive dust from earthworks and stockpiles of dirt, soil, excessive noise from earth-moving equipment and other equipment, excessive time taken to complete scheduled work, overruns, inconvenience, upheavals experienced during upgrades to road, including long-term one-way traffic flow, work commencing before 7 a.m, work carried out on Sundays, parking on footpaths, excessive advertising signage.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Yes, if you could please state your name.
And Winchester.
Oh, sorry, it's hard to recognise people with masks. Seconded by Anne Winchester. If I can ask those in favour to raise their green cards. Anyone against? Now I declare that motion carried, and thank you, Kerry, for coming along. That takes us to the next person who registered to make a motion, or to move a motion. I'll call upon Marilena Stempfel from South Guildford. Thank you. If you can come to the microphone and read out your motion. Thank you.
Yeah, take my duck face on. Oops. Okay, I'll do that. Good evening, everybody. So the first motion is that the City of Swan, 1, conduct a baseline study to assess the location and extent of remnant and native vegetation, excluding that in parks and reserves, including private and otherwise held tenure within the City of Swan, such as floodplain, wetland, bush. 2, assess the loss of cumulative remnant and native vegetation due to proposed development expected to occur in the next 20 years or so. 3, identify where green corridors will be threatened and prepare management plans to maintain and enhance connectivity. 4, propose alternative development solutions if cumulative development will heavily impact on the functionality of urban green and green corridors. 5, manage and as a priority preserve such assets as included in the asset management strategy. And the reason for this motion is that the environment is a key asset for the City of Swan. And by the look of it, by the community that is present here and probably silent out there, green corridors and urban greens are vital to supporting the ecosystem and are also being demonstrated to be very good for mental health of your citizens. A project-by-project based assessment does not provide full understanding of cumulative impacts over time associated with developments and removes the ability to proactively manage and protect such locations. For example, can I just finish?
Continue,
It's not
please,
For
yes.
example, if you think of the Lloyd Street Bridge situation, within the Workshop Avenue and the duplication of the bridge over the Helena River at the Roe Highway, we are going to lose probably 10 hectares of remnant vegetation. But if you look at each project one at a time, you would never appreciate how much of the remnant vegetation is going to be lost. If you look at this from a comprehensive and cumulative impact, the image of what's going to happen is much different, and we can plan ahead of time.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? The gentleman there with the blue shirt. Simon Ashby, thank you. And all those in support, if you could raise your green cards. Any against? I declare that carried. If you can go on to the next motion, thank you.
Thank you. Second motion is that the City of Swan enacts a protection of floodplains along the Helena River and the Swan River in a manner that is consistent with the City of Swan Biodiversity Strategy 2016 and its floodplain strategy. 2, that no infill is allowed within the 1 in 100-year floodplain. And 3, that the floodplain strategy is updated within the next 12 months with input from the local environmental catchment groups, DBCA, Swan River Trust, and the traditional owners. And the reason for this motion is that floodplains and wetlands are being infilled very rapidly. These are very special ecosystems that are essential to the functionality of the riparian and green corridors, supporting flora and fauna, many times protected and endangered, and are also sacred to the Noongar people.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? If you just have to repeat your name, sorry. Thank you, Mrs. Turner. All those in favour, if you could raise your green cards. Anyone against? It's carried. And on to the next one. Thank you.
All right. The third motion is that the City of Swan commits funds to support Perth NMR environmental manager and field officers to support and facilitate the activity of volunteers, catchment groups in the 5-year plans and beyond. The reason is that financial support for Perth NMR will promote integration and efficiencies in supporting volunteering activities pertaining to conservation and rehabilitation of riparian and remnant natural areas within the City of Swan.
Thank you. I'll call for a seconder. Just had a mental blank.
Lynn Deering.
Lynn Deering, thank you. Have I asked all those people in favour to raise your green cards? Is there anyone against? And I declare that motion carried as well. Thank you. And the next person registered is Mr. John Considine of Woodbridge. Thank you.
Okay, I have tangled myself. Anything. My first motion is that the City of Swan give equal weighting in all future development applications to urban planning and policies governing community wellbeing, reconciliation, biodiversity and conservation. The reason is that, as demonstrated on the City of Swan's website, that urban development presently outranks all other policies and as such is used to avoid their implementation. The community and the city, including all businesses, will benefit from development that gives equal weighting to all policies affecting the community. It will lead to a change in attitude towards the city and broaden its attraction beyond those present, for example, in the Swan Valley precinct, which is a major attraction to all of Perth. The city fails wholly to celebrate its rivers and creeks, and yet these could be a point of difference and a major attraction, providing places of peace, passive and creative recreation as urban density increases, as I can say has occurred with the Woodland Playground in Kings Park, which was one of the things that I was responsible for establishing and which has been used so heavily that they have to close it at times to rehabilitate it regularly.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Mariana Stemful. I'll ask those in support to raise your green cards. Is there anyone against? I declare the motion carried. On to the next one. Thanks, John.
Thank you. I've got a small amendment to this, which I'll read out. The motion is that the City of Swan establishes a subcommittee of interested councillors, so I'd like that word interested inserted, to work with members of the Helena River Alliance and the Wadjuk Regional Corporation, and with appropriate administrative support to develop and implement a plan to restore and appropriately develop the lower Helena River in a manner consistent with a shared vision of together, caring for country, and the City of Swan's Reconciliation Action Plan and Biodiversity Policy.
And your reason?
The reason is that the City voted recently to include traditional owners and the Helena River Alliance in progressing the design of the Lloyd Street Bridge across the Helena River and its floodplain and wetlands. The purpose of this motion is to strengthen the working relationship between Council and the community in developing and implementing a vision for the lower Helena Valley in a manner consistent with the City's vision for sustainability, biodiversity conservation, reconciliation, economic wellbeing and economic development.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Patrick Irwin. I'll ask those in favour to raise your green cards. Is there anyone against? I declare that motion carried. And your next motion, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Motion that the City of Swan liaise with the Shires of Mundaring and York to develop a joint working party to coordinate conservation and appropriate development of the Helena River, its floodplain and associated ecosystems. Reason. The Helena River is unique in being a freshwater river with healthy biodiversity throughout its length, despite neglect and damage. It remains a ribbon of green canopy from origin to confluence with the Swan River at Mandoon. The whole represents the traditional land of the Wadjuk Noongar people, and proper recognition, conservation and celebration through economic utilisation demands coordination from its headwaters to the sea. This could be a park that defines the adjoining communities and welcomes local, national and international visitors.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Patrick Irwin. I'll ask those in favour to raise your green cards. Thank you. Is anyone against? I declare the motion carried and thank you for presenting your motions. I'll call upon the next presenter of Ms Francesca Irwin of Woodbridge. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My first motion regards the City of regards Tui Gardens. Yeah. So I move that the City of Swan approach Development WA, formerly the MRA, to reclaim Lot 1 and 7 Great Eastern Highway, known as Tui Gardens, at Midland, and return the gardens to their original status as public open space. Tui Gardens was originally gifted to the people of Midland in the 1930s as parkland. Folk will tell you of another time walking through these gardens was a refreshing delight, part of the charm of stepping through historic areas into new vistas. There was an historic plaque which has been removed, referencing the railway line that travelled along the parkland, and a few remnant rail lines were still to be found on the site until they've recently been removed. Reminding you, if you don't know the story, that many years ago the City of Swan relinquished Tui Gardens to the then MRA, and at that time the gifting condition was clearly confirmed as green, public, open space. On receipt of the land, the MRA erected a fence, decorated it with a shiny graffiti graphics that had nothing to do with the community heritage or the gardens behind it. Then nothing. You must know this vista, it's disgusting. The fence is long time old, worn. Weeds grow rampant, the space stinks of disinterest and neglect for the last 20 years. It's a very embarrassing vista and another example of how a generous gift from the people to the City of Swan has been abused. So I'm a member of the Midland Society Executive, and we consider that the recent decision by the City of Swan to excavate the Midland Railway Company rails at this site and relocate them to a flower bed beside Centrepoint is a terrible decision. It's not hard to see it as an indication of no interest in the heritage value of the site and no interest in returning this to a public open space for people to enjoy. This short-sightedness is reflected in so many decisions over the years for Midland. A previous speaker has mentioned it as well. The City of Swan, unlike, for example, Fremantle City, consistently fails to understand the value of heritage and to explore the gifts of land bequeathed to them by the hard-working residents of Midland. Refuses to exploit the gifts of land bequeathed to them. I've seen many eloquent and passionate speakers at council meetings asking council to take back responsibility. I'm not a lone voice, you've heard it so many. In 2019, Midland Society offered to buy the site at a peppercorn rate. The motion I make today is also the same motion I made in 2019 and in 2021. Nothing's happened. More weeds and the removal of the rails, that's all. So you probably know that in 2019, Development WA put the site on the market for commercial prospect. No success. No success on that in putting it on the market, but it just means that there's no end in date, no end in sight. Those dilapidated windswept fence of Tui Gardens continues to be the view for anybody driving through Midland. What a statement. So in summary, this is such an important entry statement for Midland. It was not the council's to give away. It was gifted to the people of Midland as a park, and it should be returned. My motion remains as it was in 2019 and 2021, which is to ask the City of Swan to approach Development WA to reclaim Lot 1 and Lot 7, Great Eastern Highway, known as Tui Gardens at Midland, and return the gardens to their original status as public open space.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Hazel Johnson. I'll ask those in favour to raise their green cards. Is anyone against? Being no one against, I declare that motion carried. You can go on to your next one, thank you.
Thanks. The next three, I'm sorry, I didn't give my reasons in writing. I'm sorry I've got them, but I must have missed that part of the paperwork. The next three are quicker. So the next motion is that I move that the City of Swan appoint or allocate an appropriately qualified staff person to the role of Heritage Officer. Their specific role would be to research and respond to heritage development applications and provide advice on the range of council interactions that involve a heritage perspective. An alternative could be the council begin providing payment for independent expert advice provided by appropriately registered volunteer groups. And by way of explanation, I've noticed over the years and over the hours that a council frequently seeks and takes on the input of community groups and looks for their input, such as Guildford Association, to provide context and heritage advice regarding development. Whilst the community groups should be involved, they should not be the source of independent information, nor should the council be benefiting from endless hours of their expertise and goodwill on a free of charge basis. Council should be sourcing this knowledge themselves and or paying for it when a community group's research is used.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Patrick Irwin. Those in favour, if you raise your green cards. Anyone against? I declare the motion carried. If you can continue to your next one, thank you.
Thank you. I move that the City of Swan appoints a dedicated marketing officer to promote and celebrate Indigenous and non-Indigenous heritage throughout the City of Swan. Now, the City of Swan obviously is either employing or contracting a marketing professional to showcase the wine, agribusiness and tourism culture of the Swan Valley. There's plenty of good value marketing material, and also the Swan Visitor Centre does a great job promoting some information about Guildford, but it's mostly about the Swan Valley and some stuff about the rest of West Australia. But in reality, there are so many heritage sites and walks that could be created and expanded across the City of Swan, other rural and urban areas, to celebrate our mixed culture and history. For example, there's 2 books recently published by Midland Society. Sorry, I forgot to bring them with me, but you probably are well aware of them because I think they were all sent to all the councillors. 2 books which reviewed many houses built pre-World War II with fascinating histories, really interesting stuff. If you look at a successful city, again, like Fremantle, you'll notice that their heritage, social and cultural history is celebrated in many different ways, and it's partly what attracts visitors, tourists, and a healthy local economy. If we use the example of Midland, you will note that the city has a track record of demolishing or letting heritage houses be demolished rather than celebrating them. And at the Midland Railway Workshop, which was the source of, as we all know, over 80 years, a very significant industrial complex and social community, that doesn't even have an interpretation and visitor centre around it. It's just 2 simple examples. I know, and it's not all City of Swan's responsibility, but I'm just pointing to the tourism potential that we've got under our own feet in Midland. So the purpose of this motion is to showcase and celebrate our heritages and cultures. The benefit is twofold: clearly increased attraction of interest and financial economy, and equally important, the appropriate and practical preservation and respect that is due our heritage. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call for a seconder. Lynn Deering. I'll ask those in favour to raise their green cards. Is there anyone against? I declare the motion carried.
Thank you. And the last motion is that each motion that is carried at this AEM shall be considered by the City of Swan Council as a separate item, not just noted and considered or dismissed en bloc.
Thank you. I'll call for you've got a reason?
Yeah. Well, this is the third year I'm presenting a request about the City of Swan and Toohey Gardens. It's never been resolved, and I know other requests have been made. Each year, I mean, that's just one example. Each year, we see our ratepayers turn up in their own time to tell you what they want. But I've yet to see these AME motions get action from the council unless it relates to something they already had on their agenda. Watching the motions getting swept through en bloc at subsequent council meetings, when again you make the effort to go and turn up to watch, is demoralising. It's a real disincentive to anyone to make the effort to the following year. Not very full today, is it? To make the following year to come along and say the same thing, or to think that you're taking us seriously. So I'm asking you that each motion that's been raised today and passed unanimously, shall be not because it's been raised unanimously, but noting they have been, should be considered as a separate item, not just noted, considered or dismissed en bloc.
Thank you. I'll just comment in relation to Toohey Gardens. As you know, we don't own that block of land, and I'm aware of twice we've written to the owners asking for it to be returned to the City of Swan, which they have denied that request. So when you say you come here year after year and you pass the same motion, Council has acted on that, but we haven't got the result that you've desired because that's beyond our control. So I'll now call for a seconder for your last motion, and that's Mariana Stempfel, and I'll ask those in favour to raise their green cards. Thank you. Is there anyone against? Then I declare that motion carried.
Can I just ask you a quick question on a comment about Toohey Gardens, Mr.
Well,
Mayor, please? You made a comment. Can I just make a comment back?
Well, if you make a comment back, I thought you said you wanted to ask a question.
Well, it's a sort of, I'm not quite clear why you said that. I mean, I understand why you said it. I totally get it. You don't own it. You gave it to the MRA.
Well, we did a land swap and got another garden in a centre of the CBD in replace of it.
But am I correct in saying that it was a gifting condition, that it was confirmed as a green public open space?
I would have to take that on notice because I don't recall the details. It was a long time ago.
Because obviously the follow-on from that is because it's clearly not a green public open space, and therefore the terms of that sale have not been honoured, from which that might be a loophole that you might perhaps explore.
I'll take that on notice and get back to you.
Thank you.
I'll call the next person who's registered, Mr. Simon Ashby from Woodbridge. Come forward and move your motion. Thank you, Mr. Ashby.
Hello, good evening, everybody. My motion is that the City of Swan reject the north-south arterial industrial freight route through the centre of Midland proposed in the August 2020 local planning strategy, and also retain responsibility for Lloyd Street. The reasoning: since 1995, and still in the current local planning strategy, a north-south link along Lloyd Street is proposed through the centre of Midland for, I quote, industrial freight traffic from Welshpool, High Wycombe and Hazelmere industrial areas. But nowadays there's no benefit to High Wycombe or Welshpool traffic because they both cross the Reed Highway, which forms an effective faster bypass. It has been implied that this would save 10 minutes off each journey, but Main Roads WA and the City of Swan have not released traffic modelling to substantiate this, so we had to resort to Google Maps. The new route would start at Abernethy Road, Great Eastern Highway interchange. Assuming two options for destinations, one, Midland Gate Shopping Centre, and two, the Roe Highway Great Northern interchange to represent through traffic. These are distances of 5.2 kilometres and 8.3 kilometres and would take 7 minutes and 9 minutes using the existing Great Eastern Bypass Roe Highway. This was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday, so it's a reasonably busy time. This route is being improved with grade separation and additional lanes under the Greater Connect project, so travel times will be further reduced. The bypass route would only involve Lloyd Street Great Eastern Highway traffic lights once the Greater Connect project is complete. Travel time for both routes is under the 10 minutes claimed to be saved by the new freight route through town, which would involve 3 roundabouts and 2 sets of traffic lights on the Midland Gate trip and more for the Great Northern Highway route. It is clear the existing roads are a better option and avoid the noise, polluting, safety and divisive freight route through the centre of Midland, and north-south route offers no financial or societal benefits to the community and at great cost to ratepayers. The community wants less traffic through town, not more. By retaining responsibility for Lloyd Street rather than handing it over to Main Roads WA, allows the City of Swan to have more control over the use or abuse of Lloyd Street and represent the wishes of the community. The City of Swan would be irresponsible to encourage more traffic through the centre of Midland, and by retaining responsibility for Lloyd Street, should protect it from becoming a north-south industrial freight route as planned by previous councillors, the MRWA and state government. What other councils propose a main freight route through the centre of town and residential areas when a bypass already exists? I question, would councillors support this if it was a new proposal rather than one that had been on the books for 25 plus years? I think not. Take it off local planning scheme 17 now.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Mariana Stempfel. I'll ask those people in favour to raise their green cards. And anyone against? I declare the motion carried. Thank you, Mr Ashby. Mr Patrick Irwin from Woodbridge is the next presenter to move motions.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council investigate designating Midland a heritage precinct, such that the protections enjoyed for other heritage or conservation precincts such as Woodbridge or Guildford extend to Midland as a whole. The reasons for this are that in Midland we have many historic heritage properties, for instance, older than 1945, which have not been assessed for any heritage value in most cases. And so the default position is that they can be more or less demolished on delegated approval as part of a DA, as long as it complies with the R code. So there's no consideration for potential heritage value. Midland actually is a heritage town. It has, as the recent two books that have been published by the Midland Society show, it has a fund of heritage. Many of these properties are worthy of consideration, and at least that there would be a requirement to look at them and look at their value, look at their potential and record them, which is generally a requirement that they be drawn up and photographed before demolition. So it's not really going to stop demolition absolutely, but it just means that they would have to receive some consideration. I'm talking similar to, say, in Guildford, where if it's before 1945, it would be looked at as if it may have value. So it's a fairly simple. I think the option is we can start talking about precincts in Midland, but that could get complicated, and we do already have a heritage precinct, of course, in the heart of Midland, in the admin centre, the Triangle. But I think we need a general extension so that the same sort of coverage that conservation areas elsewhere enjoy extends to Midland as a whole.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Mr Simon Ashby. I'll ask those in favour to raise their green cards. Is anyone against? I declare that carried. If you can continue to the next motion, thank you.
My next motion is that Council investigate adopting a tree protection policy on private land, as some other West Australian councils have done over the last few years, whereby removal of significant trees on private property can require approval, and there can be some protection for private trees, significant trees on private land. And the reason for that is that studies by other councils have shown that despite planting significant numbers of trees in various wards, that the council area as a whole was losing tree canopy because of the loss of trees on private property was greater than the planting of trees on public land, so that the overall urban tree canopy was negative. The policy I've put up there as an example that might be adopted is the one that the City of Stirling have, whereby developments valued at 100,000 or above are required to retain at least one significant existing tree for each 500 square metres of land, or to plant one new advanced tree for every 500 metres of land where no significant trees exist. And again, the background is the reduction of the urban tree canopy due to losses on private land, typically exceeding the rate of tree planting on public land.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Mr Turner. And I'll ask those in favour to raise your green cards. Thank you. And anyone against? I declare that motion carried. If you can continue, thank you.
And my third motion is that Council adopt Midland Central Park, the Recreation Ground Reserve, also known as Midland Oval, as approximately 4 hectares defined by the boundaries that I've described there, and the west cadastral boundary being 20 metres approximately from the boundary of the Senior Citizen Centre. The south boundary is fairly well delineated as it stands, and the width of the land is approximately 180 metres, and the north-south dimension is approximately 204 metres, allowing for the fact that Morrison Road has been widened significantly. I think that dimension would have been greater. And the reason for this is that the REC was granted to the people of Midland Junction as part of the first subdivision in Midland Junction, which was Swan Location 7, divided by woods in 1891. And that showed the Recreation Ground Reserve as being dedicated to the people of Midland Junction way back in 1891. It was purchased by the Roads Board, the Helena Roads Board, I think, which became the Midland Junction Roads Board, or Midland Junction Council, and at several occasions it was confirmed by the consulting solicitors by the mayors at the time that the land after purchase by council would be safe. And it was even commented on by Sir Septimus Burt, who's had been till very recently the Attorney General of the state of Western Australia, that it was safe in the hands of the public. And if it was defined as a Grade A reserve, it would be safe, and it would be confirmed to be safe, and this will give future generations surety that it's not going to be looked at as a shopping centre site again.
Okay, I was waiting for you to read the rest of it, but call for a seconder. Gentleman in the back, if you could please state your name. Jerry Crawley. Thank you, Mr. Crawley. I'll now ask those in favour to raise your green cards. Any against? I declare that motion carried, and thank you, Mr. Irwin.
Thank you.
Now call on the next presenter, Lee Symington of Woodbridge, I believe. Thank you, Lee. You can come up and move your motion.
Good evening. My name's Lee Symington. I'm Friends of Woodbridge Bushlands. So the motion that I'm putting up is that the City of Swan respond positively to a deputation of 2020 by taking action to secure lots 0 to 4 and lot 178 in Devon Street, currently owned by the WAPC and zoned parks and recreation in the local planning and scheme and the Metro Region scheme, by seeking these lands be transferred to the City of Swan as parks and recreation. That the City of Swan offer to take over the management of this site with the purpose of securing and preserving the site as part of a Green Corridor Conservation Habitat site for resident native Quenda, Echidna and black cockatoo. The reason for this is that the WAPC have provided written confirmation to the Friends of Woodbridge Bushlands that they are again seeking appropriate end manager for this site and have or will be approaching the City of Swan. Previously, informal discussions with the City of Swan staff have resulted in no interest or action, and this has nearly led to the loss of public open space and inappropriate use for the site. Friends of Woodbridge Bushlands currently are in the process of rehabilitating the site with agreement of the WAPC, but its status as parks and recs is not secure under the WAPC. We seek the preservation of this land in order to secure land for future conservation corridor, to provide refuge for wildlife in an ever-increasing urban landscape and retain bushland and large trees, some of which may be over 80 years old or more. This request takes into consideration how preserving this land will contribute to our city's livability, economic, social, community benefits for now and into the future.
Thank you. I'll call for a seconder. Mr Simon Ashby. I ask those in favour to raise your green cards. Is there anyone against? Then I declare that carried. Thank you. And call on the next speaker, Lynn Deering of Woodbridge. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. Oops. I'll read my motion and hopefully give a brief reason. That council identify... I need to make an amendment to my motion, and I shall read that out. I propose that council identify existing green corridors and investigate the adoption of a green corridor policy throughout the City of Swan. This includes the reactivation, reinstatement and extension of the proposed Helena River recreational walking trails of 2009. Last year, we were asked to respond to the draft urban forest plan, which detailed the gap between new developments and older suburbs in relation to tree canopy across the City of Swan. In the draft urban forest strategy section titled Snapshot, it detailed a huge discrepancy between the loss of canopy and the livability reduction in areas such as Averley and Bravham within the City of Swan. Essentially, we are allowing heat sink in some areas and reduce livability because developers aim to maximise cost and obtain maximum return, delivering government's preoccupation upon density. This is of concern. We are creating haves and have-nots through such development and across our City of Swan. Suburbs with stretches of livability with open space and amenity versus those with less or none. New areas such as Averley have such reduced setbacks without paths or verges that do not allow for tree or vegetation, and this is under livable neighbourhoods design codes. The priority given to development is eroding access to public open space, reducing amenity and the quality of lifestyle, particularly in these new suburbs. Green corridors create and offer a shared rhythm across the City of Swan. The identification of green corridors across the City of Swan will not only recognise significant bushland and wet areas and identify potential public open space for future preservation. With climate change, a way of life is under threat. Identification of green corridors offers us in the Swan a bigger picture and a retention of public spaces across the entire city than this piecemeal approach of haves and have-nots.
Thank you. I'll call for a seconder. Francesca Irwin. I ask those in favour to raise your green cards. Thank you. Anyone against? I declare that motion carried. Now call on Narelle Bevan from Bennett Springs Residents Association. Thanks, Narelle. You can come to the microphone and move your motions. Thank you.
I'm not actually Narelle, I'm Deirdre Foster, the chairperson. Narelle was our secretary who submitted these motions on my behalf.
Thank you, Deirdre.
Thank you. These motions have been submitted not only by the Bennett Springs Residents Association but members of Bennett Springs, and we're submitting them on their behalf. The first motion is that more CCTV cameras be provided and positioned within Bennett Springs suburb, notably Bennett Springs Oval, Car Park, Fountain Park, Orchid Park, specifically located at, now I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Cyanus Green and Orchid Avenue.
Thank you. Ask for a seconder. You just state your name. Thank you, sir. Mark Fenner. Thank you. I'll now put that motion. Those in favour, you'll raise your green cards. Green cards at this stage. And anyone against? There's one against, but the motion is carried. Thank you. Your second motion.
Okay. That an off-lead dog park be designated within the boundaries of the suburb of Bennett Springs.
Thank you. I have a seconder. Same seconder, Mark Fenner. And I ask those people in favour to raise your green cards. Anyone against? I declare that carried. On to the next one, thank you.
Okay, the committee residents groups have free access to community facilities in order to facilitate regulatory meetings as per their constitution.
Thank you. And a seconder? Mark Fenner again. And I'll ask those people in support to raise their green cards. Thank you. Anyone against? I declare the motion carried.
Okay, the next one is that Rainbow Park upgrades be put in this year's budget for completion by the 31st of December 2022. The concept plans have been approved by the residents.
Thank you. And a seconder? Mark Fenner again. I'll ask those in support to raise your green cards. And anyone against? Thank you. I declare that motion carried. And on to the next one. Thanks, Deirdre.
Water, okay. That water fountains for personal use and animal usage be installed at all parks within Bennett Springs suburb during the financial year of 2022 and 2023.
Thank you. A seconder? Mark Fenner again. And I'll ask those people in support to raise your green cards. Anyone against? I declare that motion carried, and thank you. Have you got any more, Deirdre?
Last one,
Thank
I promise. Now, I want to put an amendment to the motion that was submitted, just a change in the wording, that the City of Swan commence investigations with Eastlink, now pardon me if we've got this wrong, to include a slip lane to the left-in access to Beachborough Road together with the left-in access from Beachborough Road to Reed Highway for the following reasons. Beachborough Road has become one of the main exits for Bennett Springs residents. Beachborough Road is the sole access in and out of the western part of Bennett Springs. Beachborough Road will be becoming increasingly more busy once Metronet project and Malaga Station is complete and running. The greater access to Malaga Station would be created should slip lanes be included. And the people in Bennett Springs, particularly in the eastern part of the original Bennett Springs estate, will find it more difficult and more dangerous to get in and out of their area.
Thank you. A seconder? Mr. Mark Fenner again. And I'll ask those people in support to raise your green cards. Anyone against? Then I declare that motion carried as well, and thank you for your attendance tonight, Deirdre. I have Mr. Bill Carroll from Gidgegannup. Are you here, Bill? Yes. Thank you. If you can come forward, you have a motion to move. I haven't been given what it is, so if you can read it out and provide a copy to the staff, thank you. Sure. Unless they have it.
No, I hadn't formulated it before the cut-off time. Sorry.
Thank you.
So, in the interests of all communities along the route of Eastlink, I ask that the City of Swan and its electors to remove all support for the Orange Route Eastlink project. And the reason for my motion is, if we go back a couple of hundred years, one of the most idyllic communities with one of the best lifestyles ever known existed, and then James Stirling came sailing up the river, the Derbyl Yerrigan. He had an axe in one hand and a black blank title deed in the other, and he slung a muzzle over his back. The term landed gentry comes to mind. Did Mr. Stirling consult with the locals in regards to their lifestyle? I then want to fast forward 193 years. Has the City of Swan consulted with all communities from Middle Swan to Gidgegannup before they embarked on a campaign to promote Eastlink? I understand that Eastlink is a federal road project and the City of Swan will only play a small part, but I looked at the Movida website, the Movida estate along Farrell Road, and there's not one mention of the Eastlink Orange Route mentioned on their website. I'm sure that the people who are buying up the young families, building their first homes, etc., will get a hell of a surprise within a few years that they see a huge scar being cut into the landscape very close to their newly acquired properties. The city produced a video, produced stickers for cars, and have used ratepayers' money to produce these the paraphernalia, etc. And it was totally inappropriate, and I was never asked if they wanted to do that. I noticed that the city has a web page where people can click on and offer support, but there's nothing in there for people who don't want to offer support. So I'm a member of Rethink Eastlink, and our mission is to research, inform and communicate the irreparable harm that will result to the environment, heritage, health and communities of Perth Hills if the proposed Eastlink WA highway is built, and to ensure it is declared permanently untenable. This grassroots campaign has been initiated to represent the community in opposing the construction of Eastlink WA. We all choose to live together in the idyllic, unique and biodiverse Perth Hills and want to preserve it for our children and future generations. This planned heavy vehicle route will impact heavily livability for residents in Stratton, Jane Brook, Gidgegannup and onwards. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call for a seconder. The lady over here. Emma Clementine. Thank you. And I'll ask those people in support to raise their green cards. And anyone against? I declare the motion carried and call upon Anne Winchester from the Upper Swan Residential Ratepayers Association. You've done that? Okay, I'll ask, are there any further motions from the floor? Yes, sir?
Mr. Mayor, I don't have a motion to put. I was unfamiliar with the format of this evening, but I'd appreciate an opportunity just to make a brief statement.
You can make a public statement if you go to the microphone, state your name and the suburb, and you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name's Richard James, and I'm the chairperson of the North Swan Land Conservation District Committee. I've been listening intently to the previous statements and the motions made this evening, and one of the key things that comes to mind is that the vast majority of the motions and statements were concerned with the environment. And there are 3 words that seem to put it all together, which people are concerned about within the City of Swan. It's the conservation of our natural environment and the losses which are ongoing. And the losses create a cumulative effect, which the City of Swan does not appear to put the dots together to recognise the cumulative effect of the loss of the environment. And thirdly, there's the compliance that seems to be lacking, where when developments are put forward, there are promises made, but the compliance of those promises is not always followed up. And so there's the conservation, the accumulation, and the compliance. So there are 3 C words there to be taken on board. I've had a brief look at the vision of the City of Swan, the vision and the values, and I'm assuming it's up to date. I just looked at it on Google. And that there appears to be a complete lack of recognition of the environmental benefits that the City of Swan has. It talks about development, it talks about well-being, but it appears to miss entirely the environmental benefits of the City of Swan. The City of Swan is not just Midland. It reaches out to Gidgegannup and it goes up to Bullsbrook. It has a wealth of environmental benefits within the City of Swan, and these areas really do need to be recognised and protected for future generations who live within the city of Swan. So thank you. That's just a brief statement.
Thank you, Mr. James. Is there anyone else who wants to make a public statement, ask a question before we close the meeting? Then I'd like to thank you all for coming along tonight, and I'll close the meeting at 7:24 p.m. Thank you. I believe there's some light refreshments if you wish to stay and have a talk. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you to the staff and councillors for your attention well. Thank you.